much too complex, too complex, much too complex, too complex, too complex, too complex.
Good afternoon and welcome to Not on My Watch. My name is James K. Holder II, aka Sir James II, and today I'm coming to you in a little bit of a different format, only to really underscore the significance of this moment in American history. We have witnessed several very glaring expressions of contempt to the American voter, to the will of American people in this country in the last 72 hours. And we're in the storm. This is going to continue. So I invite you to be alert, remain focused on what you're seeing happen and unfold before you, and whether it be in the Senate, whether it be with the confirmation hearings, whether it be with judicial rulings on Trump's own personal lawsuits, and even Melania Trump's lawsuits that are currently being scrutinized. We are at a pivotal moment as it relates to voting rights, as it relates to civil rights. And I just want to kind of start today. I know it's Black History Month. I don't even want to stick to the formal introduction. Of course, I want you to like and comment and retweet and repeat and repost this as much as you see fit. I definitely want to spread this message, but today is just particularly significant. And I'm going to start a little bit in reverse order. You know, it's Black History Month. Today is Wednesday, February 7th. 7th or 8th. And we've really been, it's the 8th, I apologize. And we've been focused on, of course, Black History Month and just significant trials that have happened through the course of our story. But today I want to focus on the late widow of the Honorable Dr. Martin Luther King, Mrs. Coretta Scott King. Born in 1927 in Alabama. Her existence is really such a, it so encapsulates what we're going through now. The whole purpose of Black History Month, in my view, is just to serve as this time capsule, to look back and say, what are the lessons of our journey? What are the things that we've gotten from this whole process, from all the struggles, and where can we take those with us? How can we learn from those things? If we don't repeat those same mistakes, then we'll grow as a country and we'll improve, hopefully. And I know you've seen this. BuzzFeed broke this article weeks ago, where a letter that she had written in order to block the confirmation of Jeff Sessions to be a federal judge in Alabama. It really underscores the severity of what 2017, what the election of Donald Trump means for us now. The fact that this, one, it's just interesting. I want to talk a little bit about Mrs. King. You know, we talk about, we over talk about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Everybody takes his message. Everybody appropriates "I have a dream" and turns it into whatever their own personal message is. And I think that's a huge disservice to the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King was a very learned, well-read, well-versed, traveled, astute, and spiritual being. And no matter how you want to slice up how that man was and how he lived and what his message was, his legacy doesn't exist to serve any one particular agenda. It was all about justice. It was about social justice. It was about racial justice. It was about just justice for the poor. He really, really had a message that resonated, and that's why he had to be eliminated. On April 4th, 1968, we know Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. We could speculate about what exactly happened, who was up to it, and all this other stuff. But the reality is we just don't know, but we do know that his message quite profoundly challenged the white male dominance narrative, and that meant he had to go. Now, his life isn't a total loss because, thankfully, we had Coretta Scott King who championed his legacy. She made it her life's work to make his life's work not be in vain. She took the baton from where it rested and carried it like a torch. And I think she almost never gets really the recognition that she deserves for that. I mean, being from Atlanta and having a studio in Atlanta and living here, obviously there's a particular connection to the King story and the King legacy and that family. But Coretta Scott King specifically took it a bit farther. And then even to the point of, in the 80s, she became a fierce champion for LGBT rights and equality, marriage equality. She was against apartheid. She really, really took the message of King and expanded it to a modern time, to the point where really she was ahead of most of who we see in elected office now. I mean, she was ahead of all of the political figures who we see as progressive, and that's another point of debate. But she really was a champion for the people and for all people, and it wasn't an exclusionary basis. So I want to thank her, and I want to recognize her for her message. And I also just want to read an excerpt from her letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee. This was a letter. She wasn't, ironically enough, she was not able to testify against Jeff Sessions in person. And this is before Jeff Sessions was a senator in Alabama. He was up for a judgeship to be on the bench, and she was against that because of his record with African American voters. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I do want to read this quote. And forgive me because I just kind of wrote this down, so I'm reading my own chicken scratch, and you would think I was a doctor because I have terrible handwriting. The exercise of the franchise is an essential means by which our citizens ensure that those who are governing will be responsible. My husband, referencing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., called it the #1 civil right. The denial of access to the ballot box ultimately results in the denial of other fundamental rights. For it is only when the poor and disenfranchised are empowered that they are able to participate actively in the solutions to their own problems. Now, try to get that out of the frame. Now, why is that important? There was some symbolism to me throwing that letter to the ground just now, because this is what we've seen over and over again in our government with the people who we have used our power, our franchise, to elect to protect us, protect our interests, our rights, our values. We've seen the true compass, the true expression of our faith, of our livelihood as Americans, our unifying principles, just be thoroughly disregarded. It is the morning of Wednesday, the 8th of February, 2017. Last night on the Senate floor, now I want to talk just, I kind of want to take this stuff in chronological order, but it's also important to express it just the way that it happens. Last night, we witnessed the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, effectively and legally tell one of our greatest progressive champions, Elizabeth Warren, basically sit down and shut the hell up. I mean, he, in the conversation around electing around appointing Jeff Sessions to be the next head of the Department of Justice, the Attorney General of the United States. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, elected official with all rights and responsibilities of a senator, invoked the words of the late Coretta Scott King. She didn't get as far into that letter, that damning letter from Coretta Scott King, absolutely rejecting the idea that Jeff Sessions could perform any duty as a federal judge of Alabama. She really said quite unequivocally in this letter that Jeff Sessions was just simply unfit to the task of even being a district judge, not even a federal judge. And we're talking about now this man is poised to be, he's nominated and under consideration to be the head of the Department of Justice. This is an unprecedented attack on civil rights, on really black people. And I want to kind of go backwards a little bit. Now, yesterday, what has precipitated some of this feeling that we have now is that day before, on Tuesday rather, the Senate, in the first time ever, confirmed someone so categorically unfit, unqualified to serve on the cabinet in Betsy DeVos. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right. I actually don't care whether I'm pronouncing her name right. This woman has bought her way into this position. She was nominated by Donald Trump. Her family gave at least, some reports say $1 million to the Republicans for this past election. Some say more than that. We know she gave money to Trump's campaign. She gave $10,000 to Marco Rubio of Florida, who also voted for Betsy DeVos. The reality is this vote, despite millions of calls to our senators, millions of calls to people who we voted for, whether we voted for those particular people or not, to protect our interests, it still came down to a 50-50 vote. And in the first time ever, because there's never been that close of a vote to confirm somebody to be on the president's cabinet, we had to have the vice president, who serves as the president of the Senate, to come in and be a tiebreaker vote for the president to confirm Betsy DeVos. So why is that important? What we are learning in this situation is that this particular administration is willing to take unprecedented steps to disenfranchise the American voters, to take power away from those who have expressed their will. Now, mind you, let's not even talk about the 3 million more votes for Hillary Clinton rather than Donald Trump. We're talking specifically about clearly someone who won the Electoral College, lost the popular vote significantly. You would think they would make less polarizing choices for their cabinet, but they haven't. And you would think, within a consideration of that the people who barely got into office and got reelected, people like John McCain, people like Marco Rubio, would understand that their position in power is to serve the American people, put country before party, and that is not what we're seeing. Betsy DeVos presents a very particular threat to the American people because we have entrusted her effectively with the future of our children, our education system, and not even just children, students in general. We're talking about from pre-K to post-doc, everything. She has reign over who has access to education, who has access to funding, how federal funds are distributed. I shudder to think what she's going to do to early childhood education. I shudder to think what she's going to do to special education. I shudder to think what she's going to do to historically black colleges and university funding. But even all of that aside, what's most disturbing is that her nomination, her election, the vote that they put up for her came specifically before Jeff Sessions because they needed to have Jeff Sessions in the Senate in order to be one of those 50 votes for her. If they had confirmed or tried to confirm Jeff Sessions before Betsy DeVos, he wouldn't have been there, and she wouldn't have been able to, she wouldn't have even gotten passed. They are strategically undermining everything that the American people want. Bringing it back to last night. Never seen this before. Elizabeth, now, mind you, on Monday night going into Tuesday morning, the Democrats staged another sit-in. And this has become sort of par for the course with the Democrats. They do these all-nighters, they get donuts and pizza and all kind of stuff, and they have these little campouts on the Senate floor typically, where they are sort of basically protesting some action or some vote that's coming up. And we saw that happen on Monday night going into Tuesday, and we're seeing it again from last night going into today. That there's such an egregious and there's such a vehement rejection of Jeff Sessions by the Democrats, and really by the plurality of Americans, that there has been this forced interaction, this campout, this stakeout to prevent him from taking office. And in the pursuit of that, Elizabeth Warren is up at the podium and she's speaking. She brings up this letter from the Honorable Coretta Scott King, which was addressed to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Forgive me, I had it written down on the note. I believe in 1986, where she thoroughly went through and presented a case that, based on the fact that there were the marches in Selma, where you had 10%, and this is during the time of Martin Luther King. I believe this was 1965. Forgive me on my history and my dates. 1965, Selma, March on Selma. This is for the Voting Rights Act. You had 10% of the black community in Selma, Alabama, show up to march to protect their voting rights. And this is because black people's skulls were getting cracked. They were in fear for their lives to go vote. And it's important to remember this imagery. It's important to go back and look at the photos of Bloody Sunday and look at Congressman John Lewis being attacked by the police just for exercising his right to vote, just for trying to get people to protect their own right to vote. Because you have a culture in this country now where people are appropriating the struggles of the past. And where Elizabeth Warren quite showed such veneration to Coretta Scott King in presenting this letter in the proper format at her time, was effectively told to sit down and shut the hell up by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He invoked this rule, Rule 19, which, again, I'm not in the Senate, I don't know Robert's Rules of Order, but my understanding of this rule is that it effectively says that a senator can't basically try to disparage another senator. So, and the purpose of this is that if you get into a debate on the floor, you don't want to have sort of name calling and back and forth catty this and that. And so that's the purpose of this rule. But in the case of this letter from Coretta Scott King, Jeff Sessions was not a senator at that time. The actions and words that she spoke about that Jeff Sessions participated in were in his actions as a prosecutor in Alabama that were incredibly racist, that showed a sincere disdain for black franchisement, for black people to have the right to vote. And I want to go into that a little bit later on, but he invokes this Rule 19 because Elizabeth Warren is discussing what Coretta Scott King was saying about Jeff Sessions' actions and what made him unfit to serve as a district judge, in an attempt to really say, if you can't serve in the local level, if you're unfit at the local level, how can you possibly be in charge of the entire Department of Justice? You can't. It just seems like a common sense thing. But no, she was silenced, and effectively, Coretta Scott King was silenced as well. It's heartbreaking, and it's offensive, and I come to you today just really frustrated, because I wish that the extent of this attempt to take away the vote from and the voice of women, black people, and women of color, I wish it was limited just to the GOP, but it's not. In her letter, and I really invite you to read this letter. It is posted. You can find it on Washington Post posted an article about it, and also BuzzFeed again broke it a few weeks ago. So if you Google Coretta Scott King letter to Senate Judiciary Committee, you will easily pull up this document. It's really only about 3 pages. I read it back in the day, back when it first came out, and sort of shared it and retweeted, but I don't think people actually read it. She talks about a case that Jeff Sessions prosecuted against activists who were working to basically get black voters, elderly black voters, to take advantage of absentee voting. So that they were, if you couldn't make it to the polls, that you would, mail in your ballot or however you do absentee or however they did it at that time, which was, of course, legal. It's what white people have been doing all this time, but in the South. But it also protected them from worrying about being attacked at the polls. And so it really was a powerful tool to get that vote up. And as it gained traction, Jeff Sessions, of course, true to form, GOP format, took it upon himself to bring charges against the people who were helping to sort of secure that vote and instill that power in legal American voters. And it really shows a demonstrated and concerted effort on behalf of, one, the GOP and Jeff Sessions, that Trump would nominate, of all people, this man to now head the Department of Justice, as he claims that had it not been for 3 million illegal voters in California, that he would have won the popular vote. They are trying to revise our voices. They are trying to revise history. And within the power of the Senate, despite all of the votes that might have been and might have existed to prevent the appointment of Jeff Sessions to this position, we are realizing the unscrupulous tactics. We are watching it unfold before our eyes of Mitch McConnell, who, mind you, is also responsible. He is the architect of robbing President Barack Obama of appointing the vacancy from deceased Justice Antonin Scalia. So we have here a situation where we don't have a Senate majority, we don't have a House majority, we don't have the White House. We have an authoritarian president who is working to sweep as much power for himself, as much propaganda in his bucket as possible, to take on his tasks, whatever they may be. And we'll never know what he's up to, whether it's for financial gain, whether it's just to instill discord among the American people, whether it's just to simply invoke terror and fear. He's doing it all, and he's doing it all with the power of the Congress, which is the second branch of government, and he also is now going to be poised to control the judiciary. He's going to have very soon an appointment come up. I mean, he's already appointed his next Supreme Court justice. He's got cases pending now that will certainly reach the Supreme Court at some point. And all of it is going to be tipped in his favor. And it's a scary thought. But the message I want to leave here today is simply that we must protect our vote. When I say we, I'm specifically talking about women, I'm specifically talking about black people, people of color. We are the two groups that have been most vehemently denied the franchise, but specifically black people and black women. We're seeing it now. Not only do we have to be concerned about not being able to show up at the polls and express our point of view, we have to worry about being deterred, whether it be emotionally, whether it be politically. There is a lot of rhetoric out there, and it's coming from both sides of the aisle. And we have to acknowledge who our allies are and who they aren't. And I'm here to tell you today, I make no qualms about the fact that I'm a Democrat. I'm not independent, I'm not Green Party, I'm not a progressive, I'm not this. My platform is progressive. I want everybody to have a seat at the table, but as you can see today, there is no table here because we all need to have a seat. Have a seat with James, have a seat with Sir James, and we need to understand that some of these people on the left are not our friends. They need to exit stage left, aka Jill Stein. Now, her name comes up frequently. After the 50-50 split vote with the Senate, and then the tiebreaker, unprecedented tiebreaker by Vice President Mike Pence, we saw immediately a tweet from Jill Stein, saying, well, the only reason why it came to a 50-50 split is because Democrats serve corporate interests. Every single Democrat voted against Betsy DeVos. Every single one. There was no split on that with the Democrats. Even some Republicans voted against her, but it wasn't enough. It came to a tie. And when you have voices that claim to be pro-Native American, pro-black people, you know, Jill Stein is the one who ran without a chance and talked about protecting native water supply. She talked with no DAPL. She talked about reparations, giving black people reparations for slavery. She talked about debt-free, not even debt-free college, but just forgiving college debt, saying that because the auto bailout and the Wall Street bailout, that people who are sort of underwater on their federal loans for college should just not have to pay those back. And she really, really is a fraud. And that needs to be understood, and that's a fact. This woman has systematically undermined the confidence of voters on the progressive coalition against people like Hillary Clinton, who could have prevented a situation like this from what we see. And I gotta say, as an American, as a black man, I am terrified of the prospect of Jeff Sessions being the head of the Department of Justice. Because if he is the arbiter of justice in this country, there will be no justice for me. There will be no justice for most of people like me, people who like me. We are going to be in trouble. And there's not going to be much that we're going to be able to do. And I don't want to say that we can't, you know, have hope, but it's midnight in America. It's midnight, okay? It's dark. And we have to get serious about who we're listening to, who our allies are. Because while Senator Cory Booker testified against Jeff Sessions weeks ago, as did John Lewis, those are our allies. But when you look at someone like Bernie Sanders, who isn't even a Democrat, he levied a tax against both of those people recently. He levied a tax against John Lewis in the primary. He levied a tax against Senator Cory Booker against this recent pharmaceutical bill that came up. And again, just like Jill Stein, these people are weakening the strength and the confidence that we have in people on the left who are actively working and camping out and working to protect our vote and our voice. And at the end of the day, just like Coretta Scott King said, the vote is just like she said in quoting her late husband, Dr. Martin Luther King, voting is the #1 civil right. If you don't have that, you really have nothing. So stop being deterred by these voices, whether they are from the GOP or whether they're from someone amplifying a voice of the GOP. They both take away from your franchise. They both take away from your power. And as a black person, as a person of color, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as a Muslim, wherever you find yourself on the spectrum, just like Martin Luther King was assassinated because he challenged the white male dominance point of view. That's the goal in trying to disenfranchise us. They want to silence that opposition to the free reign and will of taking every decision from people who are different, people who are not in the majority, which soon won't be a majority. And we have to be careful about that. We all fucked up this year in letting Donald Trump be elected. We let people like Killer Mike, Bernie Sanders, Susan Sarandon, Sean King, Nina Turner, Jill Stein. We let all these voices, H.A. Goodman, we let all these voices, Maureen Dowd, let's keep going. There are names, I'm naming names, because there are people out there who claim to want to support this progressive agenda and motivation that simply aren't acting in accordance with that. Those people did not protect our interests, and so we have to do it. Moving forward, we can't be dissuaded. We have to be confident that the GOP works quite persistently in taking away our #1 civil right. And so we have to actively work against the GOP. we have to learn from the lesson of our predecessors, of our ancestors, those who came before us. It's been encouraging to see the amount of civic engagement, the calling to the senators and the marching. But what we can learn from the past is that people marched so they could vote. And your vote is sort of an irreplaceable asset to your existence. So we have to protect that. And we have to be very conscious moving forward, and cautious as well, about protecting that and also utilizing it. So with that, I will end. I'd like to invite you to join me back here Wednesday, next Wednesday, every Wednesday at noon at holderstudio.com, where there will be a new upload. And hopefully there will be less of an urgency, less anxiety. But I'm here to inform. I'm here to also offer a bit of a point of view that is from me. And I always want you to feel like I'm referencing your concern. So again, there are many other issues going on today, but the most pressing is what is at stake in our civil rights. And we must protect those for ourselves, for each other. Within the Progressive Coalition, we must be mindful and insistent that those with us are working to protect everybody in the coalition. That's women, that is black people, that is LGBT, that is the rights of immigrants, that is the rights of Muslims, the rights of the disabled. You know, we're looking at the confirmation, we've witnessed the confirmation of Betsy DeVos, who has worked to take access to education away from the disabled, the mentally challenged. You know, she works on a pro-Christian agenda, which basically means she's anti-choice, anti-LGBT. And so, in allowing her to be placed in that position, we've sacrificed, we've jettisoned a significant portion of rights and protections for the growing youth in our country, and their pursuit of an education within these United States. And so I want us to really, really be diligent about who we're aligning ourselves with, who we're working to protect. And if someone on this side who claims to be an ally is echoing too closely someone on the GOP who we know is out there to work against most souls in this country, we got to learn to call those people out. We got to learn to question what they're doing. So with that, I will just end with my usual, inviting you to relax, relate, and resist. Thank you.